Every country has a front door. Most celebrities get a key. But what happens when your name becomes too powerful or too dangerous to cross the threshold? These aren't just bans, they're warnings. Sometimes fame opens every door, and sometimes it gets you locked out. From shocking behavior to cultural clashes, these celebrities weren't just canceled, they were banned from entire countries. But here's what most people miss. These bans weren't just about crime or chaos. They were about image, influence, and ideology. Today on Starscope, we're diving into 5 shocking celebrity travel bans, and this time, we're not just asking what happened, we're asking why. In 2017, the Chinese government made a quiet but powerful announcement. Justin Bieber was no longer welcome. No concerts, no press tours, no appearances. The reason? To quote Beijing officials, they wanted to purify the country's entertainment culture. But what does that actually mean? What does purify look like when it comes to a pop star? In the West, this kind of rebellious energy is often seen as cool, untouchable, but in China, it reads very differently. In a culture built on respect for order, tradition, and collective harmony, Bieber's behavior looked less like pop star antics and more like a disruption. The Great Wall isn't just a monument, it's a national symbol. It represents strength, endurance, sacrifice. And there was Justin, being carried to the top like royalty. No effort, no respect, just selfies. Add that to Bieber's global history at the time: DUIs, assault allegations, paparazzi fights, vandalism, onstage meltdowns, and suddenly the decision starts to make sense. He wasn't just being punished for what he did in China, he was being rejected for what he represented. China's entertainment bans often target symbolism over scandal. Gaga was banned for a single meeting, Bjork for a single phrase on stage, Katy Perry for a dress. So when it came to Bieber, the question wasn't, did he break the law? It was, does his brand of chaos undermine the values we're trying to protect? In 2019, Bieber opened a Weibo account, China's equivalent of Twitter. Fans flooded it with love. Hopes were high that the ban was lifted. But then, silence. No concert approvals, no permits, still no shows. In Western systems, bans come with statements, appeals, deadlines. In authoritarian systems, a ban doesn't have to be announced. You just stop getting invited. And that's the real power of a cultural blacklist. It doesn't punish, it erases. In 2007, Beyoncé was preparing for her debut concert in Malaysia. The stadium was booked, the fans were ready, the city was buzzing. But just weeks before showtime, the concert was suddenly called off. The reason? Not scheduling, not illness, but moral pressure. Malaysia is a Muslim-majority nation with strict modesty laws, especially when it comes to women on stage. Performers must dress decently. No exposed midriffs, no short skirts, no suggestive dancing. For Beyoncé, who built her artistry on freedom of movement, body confidence, and emotional power through dance, this created a collision. To Malaysian religious leaders, this wasn't personal. They weren't banning Beyoncé, they were protecting a standard of public decency they believe preserves moral clarity, especially for youth. In Islamic teachings, modesty in public spaces, particularly for women, is linked to social stability. And a global superstar performing in revealing outfits to sexualized lyrics, that wasn't something they were willing to permit. After the 2007 cancellation, Beyoncé tried again in 2009, this time with compromise. She reportedly agreed to follow Malaysia's Sharia complaint performance guidelines, covering shoulders and legs, no provocative dancing, a revised set list. But despite her efforts, the pressure didn't stop. Religious groups protested again, not just against Beyoncé, but against the idea that global pop culture should bend their rules. And for Beyoncé, the choice became existential: dilute the show until it's unrecognizable, or walk away from a place where her art wasn't truly accepted. She chose to walk. To this day, Beyoncé has never performed in Malaysia, not because she couldn't, but because the cost of entry was her identity. And for an artist whose very name symbolizes power, voice, and unapologetic presence, being told to shrink herself, that's not censorship, that's erasure, dressed in politeness. That's the opposite of what she stands for. In April 2006, Snoop Dogg arrived at Heathrow Airport with his crew, ready to catch a British Airways flight to South Africa. They were flying first class, but when they got to the lounge, things didn't go as planned. BA staff told the group they were too large, not everyone would be allowed in. That's when the tension started. Voices raised, arguments started, then it got physical. Chaos broke out in Terminal 1. Security tried to intervene, but Snoop's entourage was already known to travel heavy. When riot police arrived, the damage was done. 7 officers were injured. The flight was forgotten. The arrest made headlines. Within days, the UK Home Office stepped in. Their ruling? Snoop Dogg was officially banned from entering the United Kingdom for posing a threat to public order. And here's the question that's never gone away. Was this about the brawl or about the brand? Because Snoop wasn't the first celebrity to lose it in public. So why Snoop? Was it the dreadlocks, the tattoos, the criminal record from the 90s that he'd already moved past? Or was it the fear of his influence, his voice, his swagger, his reach? To British authorities, the risk wasn't just what had happened. It was what could happen next if Snoop performed, provoked crowds, or brought the same energy to UK venues. In that equation, his image was as powerful as his actions. Then came Australia. Snoop was scheduled to co-host the MTV Australia Video Music Awards, but his visa was denied. Officials declared he was not of good character, citing past arrests and drug convictions, even though he hadn't been charged with anything recent. To Snoop, the message was clear: this wasn't just about airport security, it was about systemic suspicion of what he represented. He said it himself: "They see me as a problem, not a performer, but I'm not a threat, I'm a businessman." He eventually won both cases, returned to the UK in 2010, Australia by 2008. But by then, the stigma had already landed. Snoop Dogg was never banned forever, but his story is a reminder that celebrity doesn't erase suspicion, and sometimes it magnifies it, especially when the man becomes the message. In 2012, over 50,000 Indonesian fans had secured tickets to see Lady Gaga live in Jakarta. It was going to be one of the largest international concerts the country had ever hosted. But just weeks before the show, the excitement turned into fear. Conservative religious groups launched a coordinated protest campaign. Their message: Lady Gaga wasn't just an artist, she was a threat. Their accusations were loud and extreme: that she promoted homosexuality, that her lyrics contained blasphemy, that her performances were satanic in symbolism. To Western audiences, these are just costumes and metaphors. To conservative groups in Indonesia, where over 85% of the population is Muslim and where Islamic law shapes public morality, it was seen as dangerous. Not just to faith, but to the cultural identity of the nation's youth. One influential critic called her the messenger of the devil. Others said allowing her to perform would open the gates to Western corruption. Even the Jakarta police hesitated. Despite massive ticket sales, they refused to issue a security permit, saying they couldn't guarantee public safety. Backstage, Gaga was devastated. Her team offered to tone down the performance, remove religious imagery, revise costumes, cut the choreography, but the threats didn't stop. She eventually pulled the show, not out of defeat, but to protect the people who were willing to come anyway. From Gaga's side, the concert was a celebration of freedom, identity, and love without shame. From their side, it was a spark that could start a moral wildfire. She let silence speak for her, and that silence echoed louder than any chorus. She never lashed out, but she's never returned. In a later interview, Gaga said, "I've performed for 100,000 people and still felt alone. That was one of those nights, even without a stage." In a world where pop culture travels fast, not every country wants to dance to the same song. And for artists like Lady Gaga, who wear their truth on stage, being told your truth isn't welcome can be more painful than any ban. In 2009, the world watched in shock as Chris Brown was arrested for brutally assaulting Rihanna, one of the biggest stars in the world, and his then girlfriend. He pled guilty, was sentenced to community labor, 5 years probation, and 1 year of domestic violence counseling. It was, without question, a career-shaking fall from grace. And then came a second blow. In 2010, just 1 year after the sentencing, the UK Home Office took action. Chris Brown was banned from entering the United Kingdom. The timing couldn't have been worse. His album Graffiti had just dropped. The UK was a critical tour market, sold-out venues, major promo, press appearances, but all of it collapsed. Fans were refunded, radio interviews pulled, publicists re-strategized, and for years, the UK remained a locked door, no matter how many new hits he released. The legal justification? Under British immigrant law, anyone convicted of a serious criminal offense can be refused entry, regardless of celebrity status. But here's where the story complicates, because Chris Brown wasn't the first celebrity with a violent past to seek entry into the UK. He was just the most visible. So was this really about the law? Or was it about optics? Because Chris wasn't just visiting, he was set to perform. Billboards, stadiums, red carpets, his face would have been everywhere. To supporters of the ban, this was a necessary line in the sand. To critics, it was selective morality, a high-profile example of image management through immigration. Chris Brown tried multiple times to get the ban lifted. Years passed, no public movement, no visa, no stage. He finally returned, but the ban became a permanent chapter in his story, and in ours. It wasn't just a performance, it was a reclamation of stage, of voice, of image. Because sometimes countries don't just ban who you are, they ban what your name brings with it. Not the person, the perception. So what were these bans really about? Crimes committed, rules broken, or fears stoked by what these stars could inspire, say, or symbolize? Maybe it wasn't about keeping them out. Maybe it was about keeping control in. Because behind every ban is a border, and that border isn't always drawn in ink. Sometimes it's drawn in fear. Not of what these stars have done, but of what they might represent. So which ban shook you? Was it fair justice or controlled perception? Drop your take, we're watching. And always, stay curious. This is Starscope, where fame travels far, but not always where it's wanted. And sometimes, it never comes back.